Hello. My name is Dr. FOD. Well, it's not really my name, but everybody calls me that because I've been working on the problems of FOD for a couple of years. What is FOD? You may well ask. It's foreign object damage done to jet aircraft engines. Oh, why am I talking to you about it here? Well, because it's my lunch hour and it helps me to concentrate. Yes, that, by the way, is my assistant, Miss Wayward Body. Well, it's not really her name either. She got hers because she, well, there's no reason to go into all that now. No, as I was saying, the reason for talking to you is to explain the results of my experiments and to point out a few of the... Will you look at me when I'm talking to you? Lack of concentration with the job in hand is one of the things I found missing. I can see it's no good talking to you here. Miss Body, get changed and I'll see you back in the office.
Yes, Dr. FOD.
Right. Now let's see if you can concentrate better here. Now, the first point that I want to make is that as long as aircraft have jet engines, we shall have the problem of pieces of hard material being ingested by the engine's intake and causing a lot of expensive damage. Now, the engine can't suck these objects up on its own. It has to be helped. Yes, I thought you wouldn't believe me. So, let me show you some experiments that we've been conducting. Now, what do you think would happen to Miss Body if the engines of this aircraft were increased to full power? Yes, I thought you'd think that. As a matter of fact, at 20 feet, nothing would happen. Your aircraft handbook would tell you. Anyway, I don't want any of you lot hanging around in front of aircraft with the engine run. Now, to continue. In order to show you how difficult it is for foreign matter to be sucked into the aircraft engine on its own, just look at this. Would you increase the RPM to 75%? Ah, that's fine. We're beginning to make a vortex. A little higher, please. That was splendid. All right, switch off your engines and we'll set up for the next test. As you could see, although the engine was at full power, only a percentage of the smoke was drawn in. Now, we're going to place a small quantity of soft debris on the ground underneath the intake, mixed with small pieces of chalk and light expanded polystyrene, to see if it's drawn in from ground level. What? Where are you? Oh, what are you doing over there? Come closer. Do you expect me to bellow at you? This, as I said, coupled with a few other experiments, satisfied us that it's virtually impossible for an aircraft to suck up debris heavy enough to do any damage on its own. Debris can get into the engine during manufacture, during servicing, or by being blown or sucked in. And for this to happen, the object must be put within 18 inches of the intake by some other means or force. Another way for the object to get within this area is to be blown in from the exhaust jet of another aircraft. Take a typical squadron with the aircraft in nice straight lines facing the airfield. There's plenty of room for aircraft to taxi into these positions without danger of blowing foreign matter onto the parked aircraft, because their exhaust jets are directed away from them. But what happens when they leave in twos and threes? When they make the sharp turn to move along the front of the line, these parked aircraft are in a good position to get the full blast and any debris that might be lifted. And the problem is even worse if the parked aircraft also are waiting to taxi out with their engines running. Now, how can this be avoided? Well, why not simply turn the aircraft around, facing t'other way, with their exhausts pointing towards the airfield? Then, when the aircraft taxi out, they have a greater distance before they make their turn. This, coupled with reduced power at the turn, would dramatically reduce the chance of picking up debris. Yes, I know what you're thinking. What about armed aircraft? What about operational requirements? These are important issues, certainly. But I'm sure that if the principle of turning as late as possible is applied, solutions can be found. Meantime, is your parking as safe as possible? Can an aircraft exhaust jet really lift things into the intake of another aircraft? Well, over there, we've erected a net to catch any of the pieces of debris that Miss Body is placing when an aircraft is taxied over them. We're using a Gnat aircraft for this experiment, as it has one of the smallest engines in use by the RAF, and therefore the lowest blast. Well, as you've seen, quite a percentage of the debris ends up in the net, and depending on weight and size, at different heights. Oh, really, Miss Body, you're becoming a hazard yourself.
I'm sorry, Dr. FOD.
We've known pieces of debris being blown by jet exhaust to a height of 10 feet. Just think of that. Well, having seen the effects of the exhaust blast, let's explore the areas where this hazard exists. For instance, a good way to pick up debris is by two or more aircraft taxiing towards the runway in too close a proximity. Even if they stagger their relative positions on the turn, there must be a time when the following aircraft gets the full blast. Then there's the good, time-honored formation takeoff. Normally, because of the stagger, any material kicked up by the lead aircraft would pass harmlessly by. But bring in a crosswind factor, and the debris is deflected into the path of the following aircraft. Sometimes the formation takeoff is an operational requirement. Well, then it is essential to pre-brief very carefully to ensure that a critical stagger between the aircraft does not develop. It's worth a thought. It's not just the cost of the removal, transportation back to the manufacturers, and refit of the engine, but also the possible loss of life. What sort of material causes this damage? Well, it ranges from this ring from a Coke tin to debris from an aircraft. In fact, the smaller the material, the harder it is to trace, and the more dangerous it becomes. And how do these pieces get onto the taxiways and runways? Well, the list is endless. The use of close-tread tires on vehicles that have to go on taxiways is a good way of spreading the debris about. Also, bits that are left lying around the inside of cars and trucks and can get kicked out is another. No one deliberately sets out to leave bits on the runway, but it's so easy to do it without even knowing. The only safeguard is to check each vehicle constantly. Once the FOD is there, what can be done about it? Well, it can be swept up by the Bedford Laker. But not like that. Miss Potty, what in the name of sanity do you think you're doing?
I'm sorry, Dr. Foot, but I can't quite get the hang of the gears. Shall I have another try?
No, please step down. Airman, please take over. The correct way to sweep is slowly, as this airman is about to, taking care to overlap each run and progressing in the direction of the wind so that any material is blown into the area about to be swept. Even when an area has been correctly mechanically swept, it's amazing the bits and pieces that can still be found. There are places where the sweeper just can't reach. So, Miss Bonnie, you know what to do. Good girl.
Oh, why do I always get the dull jobs? Oh, well. Look what I found.
Yes, well, I think that proves our point, don't you? Well, carry on, see what else you can find.
Oh, dear.
Apart from regular sweeping, we thought that each station ought to work out its own priority sweeping areas because each station has its own particular needs. For instance, it might be necessary to sweep this area only once a week, whereas it might be an advantage to sweep this ASP 2 or 3 times a day. Each airfield has its own traffic problems. Relative to this Radio contact between the runway sweeper and air traffic control is absolutely essential to enable the sweeper to be redirected at a moment's notice to high-risk areas for short, controlled spells. Well, what do you think of it so far?
Rubbish.
Oh, then at least one person has got the message, because that's what it's all about. Rubbish. Oh, not now, Miss Bonnie. Oh, please. Then there's the question of people being downright careless to be taken into account. The shadow tool board has helped to a large extent to stop actual tools being left in aircraft, but accidents can still happen.
Oh, good afternoon, Dave. From 316 to Football, please.
So, Colin, how many do you want, mate?
Oh, a big handful, please. I've got a large repair to do.
1 minute, then, please. There we are, Colin. How's that?
Oh, that'll do fine. Thanks so much indeed, Dave.
Right. See you, mate.
Yeah, see you later. Cheers.
No set number of rivets were drawn from the stores, so the mechanic has no way of checking on the lost rivet. Any material in addition to the amount needed for each job becomes a FOD problem. There's no doubt about it. A clean hanger is a happy hanger, or at least it should be. To keep these aircraft operational, there naturally has to be an administrative system. If that administrative system is too inflexible, this leads to anger and frustration, and this in turn leads to lack of concentration and mistakes.
JT Rolls, the SWO's after you. You better go down to his office, sharpish.
Connor, where to?
No, it sounds urgent. You better go now.
Sworn to see me, Cross. Do you know what it's about?
Oh, it wasn't the SWO, it was me. Your guard's been changed from Wednesday to Friday, okay?
Is that all?
That's it. Thought you'd like to know in case you had other plans.
So I hurry down here just for that?
That's it.
Only a snipped end of locking wire, but think where it could end up if not noticed. Oh, in the course of my tests, I found that the only certain way to ensure that FOD had not got into the engine intake was the visual check. And for this, of course, the noddy suit was produced. Miss Body had ideas of her own. Miss Body has two problems. No, not that, really. Her hair is long and is inclined to get in the way, and she's extremely cold. But it's not hard to do, and it is the only certain check. If you please, Miss Body. And for engine checks on the ground, the debris guard has its uses. Of course, if it's broken, as this one is, it could be the means of causing the very debris we're trying to keep out. You can come out now, Miss Body. Although intake inspection cannot be overemphasized, to have too many of them can cause a hazard in itself. You can come out now, Miss Body. Miss Body, you can come out. Oh,
Boy, it's not my lucky day.
oh. Even if all our experiments weren't complete successes, we learned something from each. Particularly Miss Body. A lowering of standards can be caused by needless pressures. If squadron commanders set too high a flying requirement, this can cause a pressure that can escalate right down to where the physical mistakes are made, rather like a motorway pileup. But I believe this can apply to all forms of administration. What? You think I'm getting off the point? These things aren't directly responsible for a piece of hard material ending up in a compressor, but they certainly contribute. Right then, let's recap on some of the things that are directly responsible, and some possible ways of correcting them. In my opinion, taxiing aircraft should be at least 200 yards apart, and wherever possible, use minimum power for turns. This applies particularly when turning near parked aircraft. The distance from these aircraft should be kept to the maximum. Sweeping should be done, taking into account the direction of the wind and making sure that there is an overlap on each run. Where necessary, this should be followed up with a hand brush. In the hangars, the less junk lying around, the less chance of any of it ending up in the aircraft. With the final visual check, the only certain way of knowing that this hasn't happened. But remember, FOD prevention is the responsibility of all serving personnel, irrespective of rank, branch, or trade. Also, formation takeoffs must be performed in such a way that the jet efflux is avoided. But if there is a chance that the engine may have suffered FOD, for goodness sake, report it and ask for a check. It's not just the loss of money, but the possible loss of life. I cannot overemphasize the continuing need for close supervision and good management throughout Royal Air Force. I know that this all sounds a little obvious, and it's information you feel you know backwards, but it doesn't alter the fact that each year the damage done to aircraft by FOD is in excess of £12 million. I repeat that. £12 million. And it's not the government's money that's being wasted, it's ours, yours and mine. You can drastically reduce that amount just by avoiding FOD. And remember, I'll be watching you. And so will Miss Wayward Body. So what do you think of it so far?
Right!